Good morning. Happy Saturday. I got to do the toast with the coffee. All right. So today's message is worth millions of dollars, literally. This information that I'm about to give you was one of the most secret pieces of information on Wall Street for years and years and years. So how is it that you invest your money over time so that you can make millions? And by the way, one of the things to think about, and again, this doesn't matter your age, because we've doubled our life expectancy in 2 generations. So science moving at the speed that it is, it's easy to expect that we're going to double our life expectancy in another 2 generations or less. So if you're watching this and you're in your 50s like me, it's not too late, because the likelihood is you're going to live into your 90s. And those of you that are in your 20s, you've got a plan for being well past 100. So what does that mean? Well, that means psychologically you got to get past the $1 million mark. $1 million is not going to do it. You got to be thinking about 10 million. You got to be thinking about higher numbers in order to be able to have true financial freedom over your lifetime. But so number one, don't just think about, I want to get $1 million. You got to get past that. Your goal should be, that's where Grant Cardone is great, the whole 10X thing. Whatever your goal is, 10 times that goal, and then that's what you should be shooting for. But this today is how you do it. So when you go into your investing, so let's remember, what are we doing? We pay ourselves first. 10%, 20%, 40%. If you're in your 20s, 40%. Or you could look at it this way. If you're in your 50s and you have no savings, 40%. Figure out how to do it. Because you know what? If all of a sudden your mortgage was that much more in order to live, in order to put a roof over your family's head, you would figure it out. If rapid inflation happened today, and then all of a sudden, in order for you to feed your family, have heat in your house, and to put a roof over your family's head was 40% more, you would figure it out. You would find some way to do it as opposed to being homeless. So that's how you approach this. If you're watching this and you're my age, you're 53, and you don't have any savings, well, now's the time to get working. So that means in your 20s you didn't do these things. Well, so now's the time to get after it, as my brother would say. So figure out how to take 40% of your gross. So that means you got to add income. That means you got to go find income somewhere else. You got to go do something else in order to create that income and put that 40% away. Trust me, you're going to be happy you did down the road. So now you take that 40% and you pick buckets. So you've got a real estate bucket. You've got a stock market bucket. You've got a precious metals bucket. And then you've got a shoot for the moon kind of bucket. And you can divide these up however you want. When I say shoot for the moon, that would be like investing in a small business or investing in your own business. Something like that. Something that it only has a 1 out of 10 chance of being successful. But if it is successful, your return will be significantly exponential. So now you got to pick percentages in these buckets. And there's all kinds of books out there as to how to do this. And you pick your percentages. I will tell you this. Everybody talks about the stock market. Everybody talks about the stock market. Too much. But the majority of super wealthy people in this country made most of their wealth through real estate, not through the stock market. Insurance companies make their money in the real estate holdings that they have, not in the stock market. And when we're going through a crisis like this is when the greatest opportunities exist in real estate. It's also when the greatest opportunities exist in the stock market, but real estate is actually easier. That's how Arnold Schwarzenegger started his fortune, was he started it in real estate. So, one of the things you could do, let's say you're 55 and you're watching this and you don't have anything. Okay. So set out your percentages and make a decision that you're going to buy 2 houses a year for the next 10 years. And you're going to figure out a way to make the down payments. that, and then you're going to rent these houses out. You're going to take care of them and you're going to rent them. At the end of those 10 years, you'll have 20 houses and you'll be 65 years old. Take all the money that you get from those houses and put it back into them. Pay down the debts on all of them as much as possible. Try to get yourself as low as you can in terms of leverage. So at 65, you now should have 20 houses that should have a positive cash flow of at least $2,000 a month, but probably more like $4,000 a month. And then over the next 10 years, you can start to siphon off some of that cash flow, but continue to pay down the debt so that 10 years later, at the end of 20 years, you've now got positive cash flow of probably $5,000 a month, if not more. And then if you want, you can sell those properties at 75 years old and then go into something different. But you'll create your own annuity. It's not that hard and it's not that complicated. So you figure out your buckets, certain percentage in stocks, certain percentage in real estate, certain percentage in precious metals, a certain percentage in shooting from the moon. So like let's say you do 40%, 40%, 10%. That's not enough. 40%, 40%, 20%, 20%. Probably more like, 10-10. See, it's too early in the morning. I'm not supposed to do math. So 40% in stocks and bonds, 40% in real estate, 10% in precious metals, 10% in shoot from the moon. That's not a bad idea. You figure out those percentages. The younger you are, the more risky you should do stuff. The older you are, the less risky you should do stuff. Stock market, have somebody manage your money. Really, you need to read the book Money Masters the Game. That's a really good one to read. But I've done it all in the stock market over the years. I've invested on my own. I've had other people invest for me. I've done have funds invest money for me. And I had a degree of success. I had one year where I owned a stock that went up 360% in 1 year. So a $5,000 investment turned into $360,000 in 1 year. It was exciting. But I will tell you, after doing all of that for all of those years, my personal recommendation is that you have somebody manage your money. Hire a good money manager with a track record. The worst part about all of that is you got to try to get money managers that don't charge you too much, and they're very hard to find. And if you read the book Money Masters the Game, they will. The book goes through the difference between a fiduciary and a non-fiduciary. Everybody now calls themselves fiduciaries. Fiduciary means that they have an actual obligation to you as opposed to an obligation to the products that they sell. I'm going to tell you right now, if you're investing less than $5 or $10 million in a chunk, it's hard to find somebody that's actually a fiduciary and will look out for your interest only and not just sell the products that they sell. But the other side of that is most of these people are really good people and they know what they're doing. And if you try to do this on your own, it takes you've got to really invest in it. It takes a great deal of time. It takes a great deal of effort. And it's hard. There's a reason that a lot of these people make the money that they do. And what they really do is they set up a system, and there's a group of people in Wall Street every year that set up these systems based upon what's going on and algorithms and the like. But it works. It works pretty well. They overcharge you, but they invest your money well and they give you nice returns. If you want to do it on your own, Jim Cramer's books, you got to read all of them and figure out, how to do it on your own. A lot of people, when I was young, the whole thing was mutual funds. Everybody said you should invest in mutual funds. And that was the way to go because somebody else managed the money and it was diversified. And they worked. If you invested in mutual funds in the 80s all the way through the 90s, you did really well. But then we found out that mutual funds were overcharging. And so mutual funds fell out of favor. So what's been in favor for the last 20 years is index funds. Well, now everybody's in index funds. Well, that's usually a bad sign. You don't want to follow the herd when it comes to the stock market. You usually want to do the opposite of what the herd's doing. So I don't know where that's going to go, but index funds have worked forever. I'm not sure that that's going to be the thing that's going to work over the next 20 years. That's what you got to figure out. That's not the $1 million, multi-million dollar idea part of this. You got to figure out how to invest in the stock market in a way that is consistent. And I would suggest to you that you pick a money manager that's got a track record that you like. You work really hard to try to make sure that their fees are as low as possible, and then you just be consistent. You've got to be consistent in terms of how you invest. Where people mess up is they start doing one thing and then they try to go jump and do another, and they always jump into the fire. And they keep, you jump into the thing that's not working. That's what's at the end of this. That's the multi-million dollar idea. So real estate, stocks, you got to figure out how you want to do that. What's your percentage between stocks and bonds? Again, you got to figure that out based upon your age. The younger you are, the more in stocks. Bonds are tough because, right now there's not a great deal of return. You got to figure all that out. How do you want to do real estate? Dean Karnazes has got a lot of great books out there on all of that. Grant Cardone's videos are amazing. Just remember, many more fortunes have been made in real estate than have been made in the stock market. Many more, but nobody talks about it because it's kind of boring and it's kind of it's kind of straightforward and easy. So and that's real estate isn't easy either. I mean, if you're owning rental properties, then you got to worry about them. You got to rent them. You got to fix them up. None of this is simple, but all of it works. And it's worked, and it's worked, and it's worked, and it's worked. Okay, here's the multi-million dollar secret. Ray Dalio, who is probably the greatest investor of all time. They talk about Warren Buffett, but probably Ray Dalio is better. And he's quiet, and he's flown under the radar for years and years and years. You couldn't get into his fund. He managed over $150 billion, started from nothing. You couldn't get into his fund unless you had $100 million, and that was years ago. His fund has been closed forever. He always beat everybody's returns. Even when the stock market would crash, he would be down only 1%. And then when the stock market was up, he would be up significantly. He lost money like only 1 year out of 30, and it was 1%. Other than that, he made money for 30 plus years in a row. So what was his secret that he would never give up? Well, in Money Masters the Game, Tony Robbins got it out of him. And by the way, that was the book that also exposed the difference between a fiduciary and a non-fiduciary and why that became such a big deal. Here's what he did. Here's the secret. At the end of every year, he would look at his buckets. He did this bucket system. This is how he invested. Certain percentage in stocks, certain percentage in bonds, certain percentage in real estate, certain percentage in precious metals. And yes, he researched all those things as best he could, but here's what was most important. At the end of the year, he would look at his buckets and he would look at their percentages. So like, let's say the stock market bucket was supposed to have 40% and stocks had gone up. So now the stock market bucket was 50%. And the precious metals bucket was supposed to have 10%, but precious metals had gone down. So the precious metals bucket was now 7%. He evened up the percentages. So at the end of the year, if he had 50% in stocks, that meant that he had to sell and get himself down to 40%. And if he had only 7% in precious metals, then he had to buy and get himself back up to 10%. What does that force you to do? It forces you to buy low and sell high, even though you don't want to. Because one of the things that everybody will tell you when it comes to the stock market, when it comes to real estate, is you can't time the market. You beat the market by getting in and doing it over time. When should you get into the stock market? Now. And I don't like the stock market now. Warren Buffett's buying nothing now. But if you're going to invest in the stock market, you have to get in and just consistently do it over time. At the end of every year, when you even up those buckets, it forces you to balance out your portfolio. And what you'll find over time is you're going to sit there and look at that stock market bucket and go, I don't want to sell any of these stocks. They're doing great. And then you sell them and you buy precious metals and you go, man, I'm not sure about this. And then all of a sudden, 9 months later, something happens and your precious metals have gone up and your stocks have gone down. That little adjustment every year forces you to get out of markets when it's time to get out of markets, because you can never perfectly time them. That idea is the idea that every fund manager on Wall Street has been looking for 20 years, right there. Even up your buckets at the end of every year. That idea right there is worth millions of dollars to all of you that are watching, worth millions to me. So, everybody, have an awesome Saturday. It is a perfect day to figure out your plan. What percentage? How are you going to do it? Where are you going to invest? Remember, consistency. The reason that the buckets work is because what happens is people chase. The market goes up and they get out of what they're in and they chase the market. Well, what happens? They go to the market and the market goes down and what they were in goes up. You can't chase and you can't time. You got to do it consistently over time. Put into the buckets. And this stuff takes time. You know, as Keith Cunningham says, you can't have a baby faster by getting 9 women pregnant. Still takes 9 months. It takes time to develop wealth. But remember how it grows. It goes along like this, and then all of a sudden that compounding interest will take off. Start today. That idea is worth a ton. I'm so excited that I was able to give it to you. We're going to get through this, everybody. It's going to be an exciting weekend as lots of things start to open up. Let's take care of ourselves. We're going to get through this.